Memorial Day for the president, one punctuated by speeches, songs, and of course, heartfelt salutes for the folks who paid the ultimate price in serving our country and defending our freedom. It was also a day full of new questions about a brewing spying scandal that threatens to overrun the DOJ and the FBI.
We are gathered here on the sacred soil of Arlington National Cemetery to honor the lives and deeds of America's greatest heroes, the men and women who laid down their lives for our freedom.
In marking the second Memorial Day of his presidency, President Trump today called on all Americans to never forget the sacrifice of fallen U.S. service members, saying they shared a love more deep and more pure than most will ever know. Among the many veterans in the audience today, 94-year-old Bob Dole, former Kansas senator who spent nearly 4 decades in Congress and was wounded in combat in World War II and received a thunderous ovation from the gathering. But while the president spent this Memorial Day honoring the memories of the fallen, both on hallowed ground and online, he began it by focusing his attention to a discussion on Fox News on so-called Spygate and the idea that the FBI placed an informant into or around the Trump campaign during and after the 2016 election. On Twitter, Mr. Trump quoted constitutional legal scholar Jonathan Turley, who told Fox that the president deserves some answers. Said of ousted acting AG Sally Yates, "I find her actions to be really quite unbelievable." And said if the Obama administration put the opposing campaign's presidential candidate or his campaign under investigation, that raises legitimate questions, adding, it goes to the heart of our electoral system.
We should get everyone involved in, get them on the record, and get that record to the public, because at some point we're going to have to come back together as a country. This division is getting deeper, and it's because politicians on both sides are playing games with these investigations.
While New York Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer noted in a tweet the Mueller investigation's 19 indictments and 3 guilty pleas, he failed to mention that there's been no evidence of Russian collusion uncovered by the special counsel, who may not, if the president's lawyers have their way, get an opportunity to interview the president in the Russia probe.
And the reality is, we're not going to sit him down if this is a trap for perjury, and until we're convinced of that. And if they don't show us these documents, well, we just going to have to say no.
Giuliani says the president insists he wants to sit down with the special counsel. In fact, he said as much on the record, Mike, but it's also important to point out that his lawyers, at least for now, are advising against it. Mike?
Kevin Cork leading us off on the North Lawn. Kevin, many thanks. A U.S. team is on the ground tonight in the Korean Peninsula, further evidence that the summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un may in fact happen. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is in Seoul tonight.
A whirlwind of activity ahead of the planned summit involving President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. At the scene of Saturday's surprise summit with Kim and South Korean President Moon Jae-in on the North Korean side of the DMZ, U.S. and North Korean teams are working out the details of the possible meeting.
I think the U.S. is trying to gauge North Korea's interest in denuclearization and what that might mean, how far they're willing to go.
Heading up the high-powered American side, U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines, former Ambassador to South Korea, and Korea nuclear negotiator Sung Kim. Director of Korean Affairs at the National Security Council, Allison Hooker, who accompanied Ivanka Trump to the South Korean Olympics in February. And Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asia, Randall Shriver, who was with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on his last trip to Pyongyang. They are facing off against powerful North Korean Vice Foreign Minister Cho Sun-hui, whose explosive remarks last week threatening a nuclear-to-nuclear showdown and calling Vice President Pence a political dummy almost blew the summit out of the water. Also set to meet in Singapore, the possible venue of the summit, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Joe Hagan and others who, with their North Korean counterparts, will plan logistics for the meeting. With more North-South inter-Korean talks planned, South Korean President Moon called Monday for even more dialogue, possibly a 3-way summit with the U.S. and the North after Singapore.
I think one thing that President Moon was trying to do was to restore the communication channels.
Talks between U.S. and North Korean negotiators are set to continue here through Tuesday. And there's even talk of one last meeting between Secretary of State Pompeo and a North Korean official to give the final go-ahead to the summit if all goes well. Mike.
Greg Palcott in Seoul. Greg, thanks a lot. The European Union's foreign policy chief says EU members are committed to keeping their end of the nuclear deal with Iran. The U.S. pulled out of the pact earlier this month and is threatening to punish countries that do business with Tehran. The EU says it is intensely coordinating efforts to protect members' economic investments in Iran. Former President George H.W. Bush is spending his Memorial Day in a hospital in Maine. He was brought in Sunday after experiencing low blood pressure and fatigue. A spokesman says the 93-year-old Mr. Bush is awake, alert, and not in any discomfort, but is expected to spend at least a few days in the hospital for observation. The 41st president was last hospitalized in late April following the passing of his wife. Subtropical storm Alberto is getting a jump on the hurricane season tonight. The storm is moving through the northern Gulf Coast, sending many holiday travelers scurrying from the Florida Panhandle beaches. Correspondent Phil Keating is in Panama City Beach tonight. Good evening, Phil.
Good evening, Mike. The center of this subtropical storm, Alberto, is making landfall as we speak, just about 10 miles up the beach from where we are here in Bay County, Florida. That's up there in Laguna Beach. And you can see the scenes of people. This is about the most crowded we've seen it all day, simply because the rain has finally stopped. But the wind remains very strong, and sand is blasting everybody who's out here. The surf remains a severe risk to life because of the rip currents, and tens of millions of dollars have been lost in tourism revenue that just blew away. Holiday anticipation of the worst kind as residents of the Gulf Coast brace for the full force of subtropical storm Alberto.
No sun here.
The National Weather Service says the storm's center was maintaining its strength as it churns to landfall here on the Florida Panhandle, with maximum sustained winds approaching 70 miles per hour. 2 million Americans now under a tropical storm warning. Forecasters say get ready for life-threatening surf conditions, heavy rains, and flooding, even tornadoes.
I've talked to sheriffs in the Panhandle. They're ready. We're constantly having updates. So I think everybody's ready for this.
The Gulf beaches this holiday weekend mostly empty. The few visitors trying to enjoy the last peaks of sun and expressing caution.
Very, very windy. It's kind of scary. The undertow appears to be real bad. I'm not letting her get in really over her shins, or at least her knees at all.
Lifeguards have now posted double red flags along the shore. Swimming and wading now banned, some choosing to ignore common sense. The Riverside Cafe near Tallahassee is one of many businesses suffering from lack of holiday tourists. A more immediate concern, securing the premises.
We're going to unplug everything that we can unplug. We're going to lift it up the best that we can, and we're just going to let Mother Nature take its course.
A shared sentiment in communities across the region, with residents sandbagging and boarding up homes. It's all just the start of what is predicted to be a busy hurricane season, with 10 to 16 named storms and 5 to 9 hurricanes. Still time to wish on a rainbow for calmer summer skies. Up here on the beach road, this is the view you see. You can see the winds are still very strong, even though, as I mentioned, the rain has stopped for the moment here in Panama City Beach. But look at the road behind me. It's been empty all day, much of the weekend. Everyone's basically just hiding inside their condos and houses. You have sand issues covering the street. So this is a big day-long event, a true washout for this Memorial Day weekend. Tomorrow, the storm will be dumping more rain in the Tennessee Valley and the Carolinas. And then on Wednesday, expect more of this rain in the Ohio River region. Mike?
Phil Keating on the Florida Gulf Coast. Phil, thanks a lot. The weather is much more destructive so far in Maryland. A flash flood has devastated a part of Ellicott City that was hammered by another storm almost 2 years ago. Correspondent Rich Edson is there tonight.
For the second time in less than 2 years, this is Ellicott City, Maryland.
Well, you always pray that it's not going to happen again. Every time it rains hard, you say Hail Mary and hope it's not the time. And here we are. It was the time.
Rescue crews say they're searching for Edison Herman. Police say he was last seen at a restaurant here on Main Street. Much of that street is now covered in mud or washed away. From beneath this small bridge, crews pulled a dumpster, a tree with roots, and 3 cars. They cleared this field of about a dozen flooded cars. Weather services report about 8 inches of rain fell over a few hours Sunday afternoon. Residents and business owners say the flash flood it created was more destructive than the flood in July 2016. That killed 2 people and caused tens of millions in damage.
We will be stronger in the future. We really will, folks. I mean, this is not a place that gives in. And we didn't give in 2016. We're not going to give in 2018. So I want people to know that Ellicott City is strong, and we're going to continue to be strong.
Maryland Governor Larry Hogan has declared a state of emergency. He had just announced federal funding of more than $1 million to help restore the downtown from the 2016 flood.
So now here we are again. And it's sad, but I said to my husband, is this our new normal? Is this what's normal now? Is for us every couple of years to have to dig this place out?
And Timothy Konjerski said a few weeks ago his brewery had just finished repairs. He says he'll rebuild again.
In the end, our real resources, our people, a building is stone and brick and metal. That can be replaced, people can't. And that's the real resource here.
Cleanup crews have been working throughout the day, and that continues. If you see that road right there where those 2 gentlemen are walking through, that's the main street. That's the main drag here in Ellicott City. Cars have been towed up that street throughout the day. Police say the area to the left and down on the bottom of the hill there, the roadway's all washed out. If you look at the house to the right there, if we were standing there, Mike, 24 hours ago, we'd be completely submerged. And then, of course, there is the missing National Guardsman, the 39-year-old. He's still missing, according to authorities. He was eating dinner about 24 hours ago, 50 yards that way. Mike.
Rich Edson live in Ellicott City, Maryland, with some powerful visuals. Rich, thanks a lot. Up next, are Democrats falling into the Tea Party trap this campaign season? First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 28 in Columbus, Ohio, where a 94-year-old World War II veteran is celebrating Memorial Day with a high school diploma. Circleville High School honored Robert Lockhart at its graduation ceremony Sunday. Lockhart would have graduated back in 1944, but dropped out and joined the Army. He says the diploma means everything to him. Fox 13 in Salt Lake City, as a Utah man and his wife released from captivity in Venezuela, hope to return home tonight. Josh and Tammy Holt arrived back in the U.S. Saturday, flying into Washington's Dulles Airport and then going to the White House to meet President Trump. And this is a live look at Honolulu from Fox 2. One of the big stories there tonight, Hawaii County officials say lava from the Kilauea volcano is covering at least one production well and heading toward another one at a geothermal power plant on the Big Island. The well is plugged, which is supposed to protect against the release of gas that could turn toxic when mixed with lava. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.
This is a story about mail and packages. And it's also a story about people. People who rely on us every day to deliver their dreams. They're handing us more than mail. They're handing us their business. And while we make more e-commerce deliveries to homes than anyone else in the country, we never forget that your business is our business. The United States Postal Service. Priority, you.
The armed forces are in shock after the attack of former SEAL Richard Taggart.
You will pay for what you did.
Somewhere in the Caribbean, there are 5-star luxury resorts where it's all included, all unlimited, all the time. Sandals, where love is all you need, because everything else is included. Call 1-800-SANDALS.
I lost 25 pounds on Jenny Craig.
From a top diet 8 years straight comes the all-new Rapid Results by Jenny Craig. Lose up to 16 pounds in just 4 weeks with food you love. Eat 6 times a day with no prepping or cooking.
You have your breakfast, lunch, and dinner ready to go. It's all laid out for you.
So you can get on with your day and watch the pounds melt off.
Man up, give them a call.
Start Rapid Results and lose 16 pounds for $16 plus the cost of food and get $100 in free food.
Insurance that won't replace the full value of your new car? You're better off throwing your money right into the harbor.
Gonna regret that.
With new car replacement, if your brand new car gets totaled, Liberty Mutual will pay the entire value plus depreciation. Liberty stands with you. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Picking the right style takes time. One picky customer shouldn't take all your time.
Need something printed? The business advisors at Office Depot can assist with exactly what your business needs to grow. Get your coupon for 20% off services, technology, and more at Office Depot and OfficeDepot.com.
They say the future belongs to those who make it. And that's why some of us just can't stop thinking about tomorrow. We've got our eyes on the horizon, our feet on the ground, and our head in, well, that thing. Nobody can see the future. I mean, who saw that coming? But Spectrum can help make it, shape it, and once in a while, shake things up. After all, tomorrow depends on what we do today. That's why Spectrum has built an expansive fiber-powered network to bring the future a little closer, one step or boogie at a time. So bring on the next big thing, and the next big thing after that. Spectrum is here to power it. Spectrum, think forward.
In America's election headquarters on this Memorial Day, a quote often cited in matters of military conflict: those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Tonight, a political corollary. It has to do with Democrats possibly repeating the mistakes of their Republican rivals and how that could affect the November midterms. Here's correspondent Kristen Fisher.
From Georgia's governor's race,
we are writing the next chapter of Georgia's future,
to the governor's race in Texas,
together we're going to make it happen,
to the congressional contest in Kentucky's 6th district.
Can you believe this?
In race after race, progressive candidates beat out their more moderate opponents in last week's Democratic primaries. It was a win for the party's liberal wing, but some Democrats say those candidates won't stand a chance in the general election. Just like Tea Party conservatives in years past who won the Republican primary but ultimately lost against a Democrat. Think Todd Akin, the pro-life Senate candidate from Missouri, who once said,
if it's a legitimate rape, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down.
Or how about Richard Murdoch, who ran for Senate in Indiana and described pregnancy from rape as
something that God intended to happen.
Now, many Democratic strategists worry that these midterms could be their Tea Party moment.
Democrats are deeply worried that their best chance since 2010 to take the House could be evaporating.
Not every strategist sees it that way.
I'm a little baffled by the left is winning narrative that is out there right now. I believe what's happened in this election is that the quiet voice in the middle has come back with a vengeance.
But Doug Schoen says what those strategists are saying publicly and what they're thinking privately are two different things.
Look at the data, look at the numbers, and most of all, look at the real panic that is going on among Democrats. Talking points are one thing, the statistical truth quite another.
His prescription for the party with 6 months to go?
Unify, develop a moderate agenda that emphasizes growth and opportunity, downplay impeachment, find another leader other than Nancy Pelosi, and talk about how we can build an alternative version of America than that the Trump Republican coalition has offered.
The next big test will be next Tuesday, June 5th, with primaries in 8 states, including California and New Jersey, 2 critical states where Democrats will try to swing seats this November, Mike.
Kristen Fisher live here in Washington. Kristen, thanks a lot. While we're dusting off old quotes tonight, here's another. Money is the lifeblood of politics, and that leads us to correspondent Peter Ducey's look at where the two parties stand financially as we head into the summer campaign season.
As Democrats try to mount a blue wave, some Republican strategists are dealing with a red alert. That's because committees dedicated to helping Democrats flip control of the House and Senate have now outraised Republican committees dedicated to keeping control. And even though there are fewer Democratic Senate hopefuls, their campaigns are raking in more than Republicans. Same story in House races, where the National Republican Congressional Committee is emailing supporters to donate, quote, to show Nancy Pelosi we won't go down without a fight. But the GOP knows it's a long time till November.
Money's like horseshoes and hand grenades. You don't need to have the most. You just
everything's got to be close. And that deficit that we have in cash on hand is going to be erased because the DCCC is spending $3 million at least in California in advance of the primary just to get a single Democrat through into the general.
A bright spot for the right, the RNC has raised almost double the DNC's total. That's a deficit the DNC dismisses.
The RNC has always outraised our party. And so when we think about the opportunities that exist, it's about being clear. How do we find more ways to mobilize itself? The Republicans outraised us 2-1 in 2005, 2006, and yet we still took back the House.
Outside money is also pouring into these midterms. From the right, with the Congressional Leadership Fund pledging $48 million worth of ads in the general election, and from the left, with liberal billionaire Tom Steyer's Next Gen America pumping in $30 million. Steyer spent last year campaigning to remove President Trump from office.
A Republican Congress once impeached a president for far less.
The ads have evolved to become more midterm specific, but analysts believe Steyer is buying just to have one of his spots pop up on TV at the White House, Mar-a-Lago, or wherever else the president may be tuned in.
The thing that he wants the most in the whole world is for Donald Trump to tweet at him and make him, Tom Steyer, the voice and the vision of the opposition.
Right around the same time that Democrats took the lead in money raised, Republicans started erasing the Democratic lead in voter preference. And now the GOP is within the margin of error in gold standard polls. Mike?
Our Peter Ducey following the money. Peter, thanks a lot. The Indiana teacher who tackled an armed student during Friday's shooting at a suburban Indianapolis middle school says he wants the focus to be on a 13-year-old girl who was seriously injured. Jason Seaman says Ella Whistler's courage is nothing short of remarkable. Seaman was also shot but not hurt badly and is out of the hospital.
As a person who isn't looking for attention nor entirely comfortable with the situation I'm currently in, I want to make it clear that my actions on that day, in my mind, were the only acceptable actions I could have done given the circumstances. I deeply care for my students and their well-being, so that is why I did what I did that day.
Quite a hero. The suspect in the shooting, believed to be a 7th grader, is in custody. France's president says a migrant who scaled an apartment building to save a young child dangling from a balcony is a hero. Emmanuel Macron has rewarded a 22-year-old man with a French nationality and a job as a firefighter. The man's feat went viral on social media, where he was dubbed Spider-Man for climbing up 5 floors from balcony to balcony and whisking a 4-year-old boy to safety Saturday night as a crowd screamed at the foot of the building. When we come back, on this Memorial Day, an effort is underway to have the nation's highest military award bestowed on an Air Force sergeant killed in a controversial operation in Afghanistan 16 years ago. National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin has the story from the Pentagon.
At a Medal of Honor ceremony last week, the president honored Navy SEAL Britt Slabinski for his actions in Afghanistan shortly after 9/11, a failed attempt to set up an observation post nearly 11,000 feet above sea level over an area where al-Qaeda fighters were operating. Air Force Tech Sergeant John Chapman was among the 7 U.S. service members killed that day after a series of mistakes on what is now known as Roberts Ridge. Chapman was shot returning to find Navy SEAL Neil Roberts, who slipped and fell out of their helicopter. Initially thought to have been fatally injured, Chapman was left by the retreating SEALs, but appeared to fight on alone. The Air Force, which has not received a Medal of Honor since Vietnam, has been pushing to award Chapman the nation's highest medal for valor.
We know now from those Predator feeds that John Chapman was not dead, that he got back up, he kept fighting. He killed additional enemy forces.
For years, former Air Force Secretary Deborah James pushed for Chapman's Air Force Cross to be upgraded.
He paved the way for the safe entry of the reinforcing forces that were coming in to follow on to the battle.
New evidence, the result of improved technology and analysis of images fed back from a drone flying above the attack site, suggests that Chapman fought on for more than an hour after the SEALs left him. The Air Force does not blame team leader Britt Slabinski.
I think he did his absolute level best on the worst day of his life.
Former Army Delta Force operator Jim Reese was in the Operations Center in Afghanistan watching the video live.
Being privy to those feeds that I was privy to during the operation that night, seeing someone shooting when those Rangers were coming in, yes, I believe Chapman was alive.
The SEALs say they did not know Chapman was alive when they retreated.
I do believe Chappie was fighting up there. His resiliency, you know, he probably passed out initially, came back up. What Chapman did was above and beyond because he was the last one on that mountain. So, you know, as we say, though I be the lone survivor.
At the Pentagon, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
A California family is resting a bit easier this holiday thanks to a group of researchers who have made an amazing discovery concerning a relative who died in World War II. Correspondent Claudia Cowan has the story from Livermore, California.
These are the fighters of the air fleet. Daily they go up and daily they land.
That was certainly the hope on March 11th, 1944, when Lieutenant Tom Kelly was on a bombing raid over Papua New Guinea. But his B-24 bomber was shot down by Japanese anti-aircraft fire and lost in the Pacific for 74 years.
Good copy. We got wreckage and deal.
The bomber's watery grave was recently discovered by Project Recover, a team of military historians and marine scientists who search for the wreckage of combat aircraft and bring closure to the families of Americans listed as missing in action.
I burst into tears. I couldn't believe it.
Diane Christie never met her Uncle Tommy, who was just 21 when he died, but his handwritten letters home are filled with humor and honor. The men fighting here for everyone are doing it for your freedom, he wrote. Years of research by his family, including flight documents and eyewitness accounts, pointed Project Recovery in the right direction. And after an 18-day search, the remarkable discovery
I will read the names that were lost on that day.
Was followed by a gesture of gratitude.
The bomber, Second Lieutenant Thomas V. Kelly. Gunner, Staff Sergeant Donald W. Bird.
When they folded the flag for all 11 crew members and said their name and passed them down, it was just, it was the utmost of respect and honor. We appreciated that so much.
Lieutenant Kelly's family will get one of those flags and now hope military officials will return to the crash site and retrieve any remains so that Lieutenant Kelly can be buried here in Livermore, where he was born and raised. It's a story that could give a lot of hope to the families of more than 72,000 MIAs from World War II. Mike.
Claudia Cowan, thanks very much. Up next, the panel on the president's efforts to resurrect the North Korea summit. First, beyond our borders tonight. Not everyone in Ireland is celebrating the referendum to repeal the nation's strict abortion ban. Many Sunday worshippers said the move reflects a weakening of the Catholic Church's historic influence and fills them with dread for the country's future. The referendum won by a 2-to-1 margin. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is out of the hospital tonight. He was discharged from a West Bank facility today, ending a week-long stay that drew attention to the 83-year-old's long history of health problems and his refusal to name a deputy or successor. Poland's defense minister says he's held talks with U.S. officials about having thousands of American troops permanently stationed there as a deterrent to Russia. Poland is concerned for its own and the region's security after Russia's annexation of the Crimean Peninsula, its support for separatists in eastern Ukraine, and other steps seen as hostile. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back.
I just want to mention we're doing very well in terms of the summit with North Korea. Looks like it's going along very well. As you know, there are meetings going on as we speak in a certain location, which I won't name. We're looking at June 12th in Singapore. That hasn't changed.
I think it's possible to have a constructive and positive summit, and I certainly prefer President Trump's choice now of diplomacy over threatening fire and fury.
I'd love to see them denuclearize. I'm not very optimistic about that.
So the on again, off again, maybe on again North Korea summit. With that, let's bring in our panel. Tom Rogan,
It would certainly be amazing if we could make that June 12th meeting, in part because we just learned last week that we haven't had a lot of good discussions with North Korea about the terms of what would be discussed at a summit. And there is good reason to be skeptical about North Korea. Because we have had so many times of meeting with them, of them promising not to proceed with their nuclear ambitions, only to have them break their word. Now that they have finally achieved their long-held goal of nuclearization, I think we have a lot that we need to learn about what they hope to get in exchange for their claim that they will denuclearize.
Speaking of that, we've heard some bipartisan skepticism or concern from lawmakers. Let's take a listen.
It's right out of the North Korean playbook. We're into 3 generations of that playbook now. Act like you want to negotiate, then come up with some outlandish view of what that negotiation means, and try to wind up with early benefits to your side and not following through on what you've agreed to do.
Twice before, North Korea, under Kim Jong-un's father, committed to full denuclearization in 6-party talks in 2005 and 2007, as Senator Blunt just referenced.
Looks a lot more professional than the first time. The president is actually letting the pros, his foreign policy team, get in there and kind of lay the groundwork. There's a lot more message discipline coming out of this administration. No premature talk of Nobel Prizes this time. And I think also, one of the things that's going to be really important here is kind of setting some realistic expectations for these talks, as opposed to thinking that somehow, you know, by the force of his personality, President Trump can bring about full denuclearization, you know, in his first meeting.
Is the most likely scenario, Tom, they come out of a meeting and say, we've had a good discussion, we've made some steps toward resolving this issue, and now we're going to continue working it? Is that most likely?
I think that's the ideal scenario for the Chinese and the North Koreans. The ideal scenario for President Trump, and I think you see this in terms of how the administration is framing it, is to at least get something immediately out of that summit, whether that be a limited inspections trip by the IAEA into North Korea, whether it be a declaration in terms of the ballistic missile stuff that we know they've been doing on the warhead research, something tangible. And if I think the good thing about
the South Korean president talked about the message he was delivering over the weekend to the North Koreans. Take a listen to this.
I explained to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un the results of my meeting with U.S. President Trump from last week, and delivered the message that
here and would be taking a message with him. Now it sounds like he did deliver a message.
U.S. concessions in the South China Sea as part of their quid pro quo for pressuring Pyongyang. President Trump is playing that game of unpredictability. I mean, this is the one issue I do think where the Twitter feed and the slight, you know, strangeness of it all serves a positive interest, because it throws foreign nations who have a different political structure to our own off in terms of their perception of what Trump might do.
And Karen, we know an advance team from the U.S. went to North Korea to meet to talk about this, so it sounds like they're hopeful.
And again, like I said, they're sending the pros in to lay the groundwork. But I think President Moon has been, in a lot of ways, the most interesting person to watch in all of this. He does seem to be kind of the most skillful at kind of reading all the interests and sort of bringing everybody along.
Molly, how do you think the next couple of weeks play out with this?
Well, I'm not sure, but I just want to say I think it's also worth pointing out that it wasn't that the U.S. was not eager to meet, or that the U.S. wasn't trying to make terms.
discussed with his own foreign policy team what he was going to do, that really did kind of limit the amount of groundwork that could be done.
Whether you think it's limited or whether you think that kind of pressure is actually helpful. I mean, you're seeing also South Korea is putting a lot of pressure on people. They're very eager to move things forward. And you're seeing this. I mean, I think even in President Trump's letter last week, you got a sense he said something like, we were told by South Korea that you wanted to meet. We were told by South Korea that North Korea wanted to meet. He kind of suggested that maybe they weren't confident in what South Korea was saying. There has been so much that has been communicated through South Korea, and even today they're showing such eagerness. I think that's interesting. This is clearly in their interest to get a deal going. Sure. Also, President Trump talked with Abe today. Japan is very interested in getting things going. China, as Tom points out, I think is the interesting party here. We're not going to get a deal unless they're on board. I don't think we've learned a lot or enough yet about what their interests are or what they hope to accomplish.
Now, I want to quickly switch gears for a moment. I made reference to former President Bush, 41, George Herbert Walker Bush, being in the hospital. He tweeted earlier this hour, and I thought I'd bring our audience up to date on what he's tweeting. Very much regret missing the Memorial Day parade today in Kennebunkport, and forever grateful not only to those patriots who made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, but also the Gold Star families whose heritage is imbued with their honor and heroism. And obviously our thoughts and prayers